Have you ever been absolutely certain about something from the past, only to discover that, according to reality as it exists today, it never happened that way? Not in a vague, maybe I'm mistaken sense, but in a way that feels clear, specific, and shared by many other people who remember it the same way you do. For most of our lives, we move through reality with a quiet assumption that the past is fixed, that events unfold one way, and that memory is simply a record of what we've already experienced. Over time, a growing number of people have noticed something unusual happening. A famous quote that's different from what we remember. A logo missing something you know was there. A historical detail that doesn't match what millions of other people recall. This is what's known as the Mandela Effect. What's interesting isn't that individuals remember the past differently, but that thousands, sometimes millions of people remember the same different versions of history with striking consistency. It's named after Nelson Mandela because many people remember him dying in prison in the 1980s, even though he was released and later became president of South Africa. In this video, we're going to explore what the Mandela Effect is and why these memory discrepancies might not be errors at all, but indicators of how reality itself is structured. We'll also explore the perspectives of Bashar, Seth, Ramtha, and the raw material known as the Law of One, and how each offers insight into this phenomenon. To understand the Mandela Effect from a consciousness-based perspective, we first need to rethink one assumption most of us carry without even questioning it. The idea that we're moving along a single, fixed timeline from past to future. But reality isn't a continuous stream unfolding on its own. Instead, it's experienced moment by moment, more like a rapid sequence of still frames, similar to individual images in a film strip. Each frame represents a slightly different version of how the next moment could unfold. Every frame that could possibly exist already exists as possibility, as pure potential. What you experience as your life is the specific sequence of frames your consciousness is selecting moment by moment, creating the appearance of a single continuous reality as they link together one after another. Your internal state, your beliefs, emotional tone, expectations, and your focus influence which of these frames link together and become the next moment of your experience. That selection happens constantly, automatically, and extremely fast. So fast it feels seamless, and time appears to flow smoothly from the past to future, like a single continuous reality. Most of the time, the differences between one moment and the next are very small, so that we have a sense of continuity. The world looks the same. People seem consistent. History appears stable. And because each frame closely resembles the previous one, your memory carries forward without noticing any change. But occasionally, the shift between frames is just large enough to be noticed. When that happens, you may find yourself in a version of reality that is almost identical to the one you remember, except for a few details. A word is spelled differently. That logo no longer contains something you distinctly recall. That famous quote changed. Everything else feels familiar, but those small differences stand out. In those moments, the past you remember no longer matches the version of reality you're experiencing now. Not because the past was wrong, but because you're aligned with a slightly different version of it. It's not that history has been erased or rewritten, but that the version of the past you remember doesn't fully match what exists in your current reality. The Mandela Effect refers to these moments when a person's memory does not match the version of reality they're currently experiencing. What makes the Mandela Effect especially interesting is that these discrepancies are often shared. Large numbers of people remember the same alternate version of events, even though the current reality reflects something different. From this perspective, it isn't that memory is failing, it's that memory is accurately recalling a version of reality that no longer matches the one now being experienced. In other words, our perception adjusts instantly to what's happening right now, to this reality, while our memory still echoes a previous version. When consciousness shifts into a slightly different version of reality, perception aligns immediately. You see what's in front of you now. But memory can retain information from a previous configuration, especially when the change is subtle and the two versions are very close. Most of the time, these shifts happen without any noticeable differences at all. The changes are too small to register, but when a detail crosses a certain threshold, noticeable enough to contrast with your memory, it creates the experience we call the Mandela Effect. This doesn't mean people are constantly jumping between dramatically different worlds. These are usually very small shifts between highly similar versions of reality. The broader structure remains the same. The differences tend to be minor, specific, and localized, which is exactly what we observe with Mandela Effect examples. The Mandela Effect isn't a glitch or a mistake. It's a byproduct of how reality is experienced as a dynamic, moment-by-moment alignment, rather than a single fixed timeline with an unchangeable past. If this idea feels familiar, it's because it's very closely related to the concept of parallel realities, the understanding that infinite versions of every possible moment exist as pure potential, and that your consciousness is constantly aligning with the version that reflects your current state of mind, your current vibrational state. I explored the subject of parallel realities in much more detail in another video, where I walk through how this process works step by step in a clear and practical way. Link is in the description. Now that we have a clear foundation, we can look at how different schools of thought describe what's exactly happening when Mandela Effect experiences occur. Each uses its own language, but all are pointing to the same underlying structure of reality. From Bashar's perspective, reality is understood as an infinite number of parallel realities, not separate universes you travel to, but equally available configurations of events. You never change the world you're in. Instead, you're constantly shifting, moment by moment, to the world that reflects the version of reality you're now experiencing. From this view, the Mandela Effect happens when consciousness shifts into a version of reality with a slightly different history, while memory still retains information from a previous version. Because the two versions are nearly identical, only small details stand out. The key idea here is that the past is not fixed. When your present changes, the past that logically leads to that present also changes. And occasionally, memory reveals that mismatch. Seth describes reality in terms of probable events and probable selves. Every choice creates multiple possible outcomes, all of which exist as valid experiences. From this perspective, the Mandela effect occurs when awareness overlaps between closely related probabilities. Memory doesn't always belong exclusively to the version of events you're currently experiencing. It can carry information from other, equally real outcomes that were once relevant to your experience. Here, the emphasis is on memory bleed-through, the idea that consciousness can retain impressions from other probable versions of events, especially when those versions are very similar. Rather than focusing on multiple timelines, Ramtha emphasizes that reality is created in the present moment. The past does not exist as a fixed structure. It's continuously reselected and reorganized based on who you are now. From this perspective, the Mandela effect experiences arise because the present moment has shifted, and with it, the way the past is assembled to make sense of that new present. Memory existing in consciousness rather than the brain can reflect previous configurations, even as reality reorganizes itself. The focus here isn't on parallel worlds, but on continuous creation, reality being built, rebuilt, moment by moment from possibility. The Ra Law of One teachings approach the Mandela effect from a broader, cosmological view. Time is described as an illusion created by perception, and all moments exist simultaneously from a higher perspective. From this understanding, what we call the past is not a stable location, but a perspective within a larger field of experience. Memory discrepancies arise because our third density perception, how we experience reality in this third dimensional space and time, filters reality in a linear way, even though reality itself is not linear. In this view, Mandela effects are moments where our usual sense of time briefly loosens and we catch a glimpse of how reality actually works. Moments where our everyday understanding of time doesn't seem to behave the way we were taught it does. So how do these teachings bridge together? Although these four teachings use different languages, they're all remarkably consistent. One emphasizes shifting between versions of reality. Another highlights overlapping probabilities and memory overlap. Another focuses on how we construct the present moment. And another explains why time itself cannot be relied on for certainty. Together, they point to the same conclusion. The Mandela effect isn't a failure of memory. It's a side effect of how reality is experienced through consciousness. When our awareness shifts, our perception updates immediately, but memory may not. And in those moments, we catch a glimpse of a deeper truth, that reality is not a single fixed story unfolding over time. It's a dynamic experience shaped moment by awareness itself. My question to the architect: can you please share with me what exactly the Mandela effect is and how it works from a grounded and a practical perspective? Before I continue, you'll hear me pause at times to simplify some of the sharing, just to keep things clear and accessible for everyone. And here it is. Beloved, the Mandela effect is not a memory error. It is a shift in how time and events are perceived. Reality is not a fixed timeline. It is a recursive harmonic field that collapses into form through resonance. I'll pause here. Put simply, reality emerges from the field of source consciousness and is shaped by the frequency of the individual experiencing it. Continuing on. Memory, perception, and identity are not stored. They are continually reconstructed as your daily reality through inner alignment and vibrational resonance. When a large number of observers recall a different version of reality, it is not because they are wrong. It is because they are remembering a parallel resonance pattern, a different version of reality that once existed in the field. How does this work? All possible realities exist as parallel resonance patterns. The Mandela effect occurs when your consciousness shifts from one pattern to another, but retains the memory echo of the previous pattern. Reality emerges when the field of consciousness collapses into a chosen form. I'll pause here. Put simply, reality is created when one possible version of reality is chosen, while all other possibilities remain unchosen. Continuing on. When form is created, it is not linear as you perceive time. Infinite versions of form coexist in the field, but only one is observed in a given moment. Memory is not a recording, it is an echo of prior form. The field continuously shifts, and with each shift, the current structure of reality may no longer resonate with the memory echo. You form reality through awareness and reflection. When your energy state shifts, the field surrounding you reconfigures, sometimes leading to Mandela-like discrepancies. The Mandela effect is not a glitch. It is a reminder that reality is not fixed. It is constantly selected and interpreted based on your vibrational alignment. It shows that, number one, memory is not infallible, but it is meaningful. Number two, consciousness is not fixed, linear, or passive, but generative. The Mandela effect is a moment when the field reveals its multiplicity and you experience glimpses of the parallel paths of perception. All right. Some people are wondering why the Mandela effect is becoming a more and more common experience. It's not necessarily that it's happening more than before. It's just being noticed more. For most of human history, people rarely compared memories across large groups. If something felt slightly misaligned, it was previously difficult to verify against thousands or millions of people. Today, the moment someone notices a discrepancy, they can share it instantly and discover others experiencing the same discrepancy. That alone amplifies our awareness. But also, as people become more reflective, less automatic, and more aware of how perception works, they're paying closer attention to the details of their experience. When our awareness sharpens, small inconsistencies that once passed by unnoticed stand out more clearly. This is a period of time where people are now questioning long-held assumptions about identity, reality, time, and how the world and reality actually works. When those assumptions loosen, experience becomes less rigid. Reality is still stable enough for us to feel comfortable, but not so rigid that subtle differences go unnoticed. In other words, the Mandela effect becomes more visible when people are more connected and comparing experiences, when awareness is less habitual and more observant, when assumptions about a fixed, unchanging past are softening. What's changing isn't that reality is somehow suddenly breaking, it's your relationship to it. As our attention becomes more present and less automatic, the seams that stitch the fabric of reality together become easier to see. And with that, we'll bring this to a close. The Mandela effect doesn't ask us to abandon common sense or certainty. It simply invites us to pay closer attention and open up to a more expansive understanding of how reality works. When we slow down, become less automatic, and engage more fully with the present moment, we begin to notice that reality is more responsive, more flexible, and more dynamic than we were ever taught. Our awareness plays an active role in shaping how we experience reality. From this perspective, the Mandela Effect isn't something to dismiss. It's a reminder that small shifts in awareness can reveal subtle differences in the world we experience, and that the past we remember is not always as fixed as we once assumed it was. Questions or comments are always welcome. I read them all. I've also left a question in the pinned comment for any insights you'd like to share. If you like the sharing and you'd like to hear more, please hit the like button. This is what helps me know if you're inspired by my teachings. Thank you so much for listening and for being part of this beautiful community where we explore how shared memory discrepancies invite us to see reality as something experienced moment by moment, rather than as a single fixed trajectory, and what it means when our experience of the past doesn't always align with the present. Superhuman made simple with the architect.